In December 2012, almost 10 years ago, two federal prisoners in Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center took a rope they'd made from braided bed sheets and dental floss. They anchored the rope to an inside pipe. They wrapped the rope around a cell bunk bed and rappelled 17 stories down the side of the building. That right there is the concept behind the new album from Axons. It's called I Object to Everything. I'm joined by Axons tonight. This is Car Con Carne.
It's Car Con Carne. Let's eat in the car. It's Car Con Carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
So Adele from Axons is here. 100 agent task force to bring down the fugitives. The first guy was found in 2 days. It took three weeks to find the other one. In the spirit, Adele, of write what you know, you're a civil rights lawyer. And when it comes to write what you know, the stuff you know can be, as the cliche goes, stranger than fiction. This story obviously spoke to you.
Absolutely. I was a young lawyer when it happened, when these two guys escaped from the MCC about 10 years ago. And everyone in my office was following it closely. We all knew it was something really fascinating and weird and also death-defying.
Yes. Above.
Yeah. And it was just almost outlandish that it ever happened, that all the planning that went into that kind of escape went undetected. So it was, fascinating story. And of course, as somebody who represents people who are involved in the criminal justice system and a lot of people who are imprisoned, there was just something even more appealing and fascinating to me about this story.
And the album out on April 8th. April 8th, yes. I object to everything. I'm guessing that's a refrain you've heard in the courtroom.
It's a way I've certainly felt. I took the title of the album from something that one of the escapees said during his trial. So Joseph Jose Banks was accused of robbing several banks, attempting to rob a few others. And for a variety of reasons, he opted to represent himself at his trial. He didn't have any formal legal training, and the defense he put on went awry in several ways. But when the prosecution would put on a piece of evidence during the trial, he would be given an opportunity to state whether he had an objection. And at one point during the trial, the judge asked him whether he had any objection to a piece of evidence. And he said, I object to everything, past, present, and future. Which I thought was an amazing turn of phrase and appealed to me greatly as someone who sometimes just sees, so much of my work feels like we're pushing back on the marginal worst parts of the system that we can do something about. But oftentimes the real answer, I feel like, is flush the entire system down the toilet and start over again. And I do object to all of it in so many ways. So it just really jumped off the page to me when I read that part of the transcript because it was a relatable sentiment.
And I do want to talk about this album. And I should mention you're playing the Hideout. It's the release show on April 7th, night before the official release. You're playing with Shannon Candy, who is fantastic, and Deep Fake. That right there is a show at the Hideout. But since you kind of went there, is the criminal justice system broken beyond repair? Can it be fixed? How does it get fixed?
Well, that's a really big philosophical question. So I think, I have my disposition towards this as someone who just sees all of the malfunctions of the system. So especially over the past couple of years, pretty much at least a part of every day is devoted to working with people who are in prison and oftentimes trying to get out of prison, especially when their time is up. I'm trying to help them find a place to go so they can get out on parole, things like that. And so often I just think, wow, our approach to responding to crime is just totally ineffective at best and oftentimes counterproductive at worst. We have these prisons that really I mean, it's almost cliche to say it, and it barely counts as an insight at this point, but don't do anything to rehabilitate people. It often is just warehousing people in oftentimes very brutal circumstances that really deprive them of the ability to rehabilitate, to learn from their mistakes and get better, and instead just perpetuates cycles of not being able to function in society. So I think that there's so much about our response to crime that is malfunctioning beyond repair.
In Illinois, and I think this number is right, the recidivism rate is within 1 year of release is 17%. Within 3 years of release, 43%. Neither of those sound good.
I mean, this gets into kind of the weeds of my work, but I'm very skeptical of recidivism rates. Like, who are we talking about? Like, it's as if we've said everyone who is in the system is kind of a monolith, right? It's not a homogenous group. So the fact that people go back at whatever rate, 17%, 43%, whatever it is, I don't know that that's that meaningful a metric, because you have to look at why people go back. Like, I see so many people going back for things that no one would think of them as a crime. They're just technical violations of parole rules, and that sends so many people back to prison after they've done their time and are trying to reintegrate into society, get back on their feet, be positive and productive members of society. So I don't know what to think about, recidivism figures other than it oftentimes to me isn't that meaningful a metric, because what are we calling recidivism? Well, oftentimes it's like violating a technical rule.
Got it. Well, I guess let's look at this from another perspective. How can communities help? How can the formerly incarcerated who are back in the world, how can they find the skills they need so that they don't slip, so that they don't reoffend? How much are communities responsible for helping with that?
So I think that there's a big picture question there, which is, we put all of these systems in place that are tough on crime or supposedly crime prevention. And oftentimes they are not that well thought through. They are window dressing that sounds good. It's a nice soundbite for a state lawmaker to send out to their constituents. And especially when we do have, increasing crime, like right now, people want to have a convenient scapegoat for that. And they want to have something that sounds like a response. But what we end up doing is putting in place this massive apparatus that really just actually makes it hard for people to get back on their feet. So I think we need to start from a recognition that almost everybody who goes into the criminal justice system is going to come back out again. And the question is, how do we allow them to be contributing members of society again? And if we impose this kind of permanent civil death on that, there's so many ways in which you can't participate in society after a conviction for a serious crime. We're starting from just the wrong point, because we should want people to try to get out and work towards their redemption. I'm not against accountability. Accountability is, of course, important, and that's an essential function of the criminal justice system. But so often what we do within that system goes way beyond accountability, and it just tips over into vengeance. And it also just tips over into lawmakers wanting to make us feel good, like we're doing something for safety. And people are very quick to latch on to kind of facile answers to questions that are way more complex. So I think, the question about the broader community, I guess, I don't know, like how communities should, be responding to this. I guess I just want to say, I think we should start from the standpoint that we want people who are going to be released from prison eventually to be able to do better, to have a real opportunity to take responsibility for what they did and then move on from that. And have a positive life. And so much of what we do to people both within prison and then after they get out really just runs counter to that.
So with that, I object to everything. I mean, hearing your perspective and knowing your background, I think is really interesting, and it informs your music. And it sounds to me like this is the sort of job, career, vocation you have where you can't help but take your work home every now and then. Seems to me like you really need this creative outlet.
I love having art. I've always kind of been a hobbyist musician, played in bands for a long time. And so, yes, I mean, I enjoy using another side of my brain, especially because work is often, it can be really like not just intellectually challenging, but emotionally challenging, just because, I'm talking to families and clients who are just going through really, really difficult situations. So I love having the creative outlet, and working on this project was really interesting because in some ways it did draw on my experience as a lawyer, and some of the things that I've come to feel about the criminal justice system doing this work. So it was fun to incorporate that into my creative life.
And the album cover itself is the Metropolitan Correctional Center, which is, I mean, it's kind of a cool looking building for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's an unusual type of place. I mean, I actually don't know what the federal holding facilities are like in other large cities, but the Metropolitan Correctional Center does stand out in a crowd. I mean, it's kind of a beautiful and unusual looking building. It's right downtown. You wouldn't necessarily look at it and think prison, but I've definitely had days sitting in the federal courthouse library where you can see kind of the top of that building, and you see people in a cage, up there getting their little bit of outdoor time, caged in this high rise.
20 More Years is a song that's available on Bandcamp in advance of the album. You did a video for it on the rooftop of the infamous neighboring city parking garage, where a lot of friends of the incarcerated visit from afar, I guess I'll say.
Yes, of course, it's been reported on over the years. There are both apocryphal and real stories about things that happen on the top of that parking garage, but it does, have kind of a perfect view of the MCC. And the day we went to film like our video, like we didn't have a permit or anything to do this, there were people up there before us, like having a birthday party for someone who was incarcerated. They brought like signs and balloons and, were just saying hi. Which
is kind of inspired and interesting to hear because we don't hear those stories.
Right. Of course, you hear about like
the Mardi Gras style.
Yeah.
Things. Yeah.
Right. For people who haven't heard these stories, there's of course like circumstances where folks who are imprisoned in the MCC want to kind of demonstrate the power and influence they have by having women come to this parking garage and strip or dance or things of that nature.
And this is kind of this song, 20 More Years, it's kind of a greatest hits of criminals. Ted Kaczynski, Al Qaeda, El Chapo, the shoe bomber. And really, it's a best of.
Well, so that's that song is about the prison where these two guys who escaped from the MCC are currently imprisoned, and it's the federal supermax in Florence, Colorado, and it's the most secure prison in the entire country. And it's where all those people live, like the 9/11 co-conspirator, Zacharias Moussaoui, I can't pronounce his name, Zacharias Moussaoui, I think, is there. Ted Kaczynski is there. El Chapo is there. Larry Hoover, like every like notorious gang boss and serial killer and terrorist you can think of, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, they're all, at this, it's an incredibly intense, highly secure prison. And then you think, these two guys, like, it's not that condone robbing a bank. Obviously, that's a crime, and I understand why it's subject to serious legal consequences. But these guys did not go out and murder people or bomb buildings, and they've ended up in this facility for many years, a long time, where the conditions are just extraordinarily harsh. It's the harshest form of imprisonment we have in this entire country.
Can't even imagine. Cannot even imagine. I love the pop smarts that exist on this new album. Can He Come Home, which is people will be able to hear when the album comes out. And this is just power pop fun, sonically.
Thanks.
I mean, very Midwestern, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's the kind of style of song I'm like best at writing, or just kind of, power pop.
Well, and Past, Present, and Future, which is a song that people can listen to right now if they want to. That's more, it's jangly, dream pop kind of stuff. That's definitely a sweet spot for you, for sure.
Thank you.
I also like, there's a song that people will be able to hear when they can hear the album, or when they can see you at the Hideout. Suspended. The guitars are just really cool on that one.
Oh, thanks.
And then there's a song, Shove It. That's the one that, to me, and you may think I'm crazy for saying this, it starts out like a Pixie song to me.
I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I mean, it does start out with like a really strong bass line that's kind of carrying everything.
It's cool stuff. And I love the backup vocals and the harmonies on the album. It's just really well done. And the fact that it's all tied up in this concept, which is, I think, creating a concept album is kind of not a lost art so much as it's a forgotten art, as we live in a very a la carte musical culture. I think it's cool to have a complete artistic statement.
Thank you.
Nice vision.
Thanks so much. I had fun making it. It just turned out to be really fertile ground when I was like looking for something to write songs about. I thought maybe I would write a song about this escape, because it was just a super interesting, piece of Chicago history that was appealing to me. But then I started downloading all the transcripts from the case, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's some level on which the escape is the least interesting thing that happened to these guys. Like their trials and the things that happened in court, and what happened after that is all really, really fascinating too. And so I quickly realized that there was just a lot there that I wanted to draw on, and became interested in doing a full-length record.
The stories are fascinating. And how, I guess this explains, we in America have a fascination with crime. I mean, it's been propelling Netflix for the past 2 years. We have a fascination with criminals, how they think, how they behave, and where they end up. Is that a bad thing for us, or is it just a thing?
That's so interesting. I mean, we do. It's like the most popular genre of podcast, and right. Obviously tons of Netflix specials are all about various types of crime and fraud. And it's just an interesting question. What is so appealing to us as a society about these types of stories? And I don't know.
I always kind of perceived it as but for the grace of God voyeurism.
I think that's a great insight, because that's something that I'm always struck with, both in my work and in thinking about this record, was the lines are often so fine. We often can otherize people who are within the system, and especially people who are imprisoned, as like criminals, like as if that's a label that makes that says something fundamental about the person, right? But everybody's more complex than that. There's multiple facets to every person, including people who have violated our laws and norms. And the ways that people end up in those systems, or their lives end up going off the rails, are oftentimes kind of shockingly quotidian. It's not like this is some fundamentally different type of person,
right,
who commits a crime and ends up going to prison.
Right. You're right. It is a super fine line. So, Adele, I Object to Everything. That is the new album, new release from Axons. It is available everywhere. streaming on April 8th, we can get an early live raw in your face preview of all that on stage. The release show is April 7th at the Hideout. Again, the Shannon Candy and Deepfake. What a show that is. I think this is super cool. And I love the concept. And, you know, as a Midwesterner, I love the pop smarts you're showing off here.
Thank you.